This year I did 4 artist markets and conventions that varied wildly in size. We're talking local craft fair all the way to the mammoth that is Adobe MAX, and everything in between. I'm gonna break down the details of each one, sharing how I got in, what the expenses looked like, what my setup was like, and what I learned. But first, let me give you a rundown of what kind of stuff I sell and my background for context. I've been mostly selling stickers and t-shirts via my online Shopify shop since 2015. Everything I sell is an original creation, so no fan art or other IPs. No shade to anybody who does that, but that just ain't me. All the products I sell are things that I design and send to production, so quality is always top of mind for me, and I also fulfill my own orders, so I'm very hands-on. So I'm not new to making and selling merch, but I am very new to in-person events. Prior to this, I had only done Dribble Hang Time in 2019, and last year I did CreativeWorks in Memphis. So now that you're all caught up, let's talk about the 4 artist markets I did this year. The first event of the year was a one-day craft show in a park in Hudson, New York. This wasn't a totally planned event. My cousin, who's a baker, told me about it, and we decided that we were gonna split a table and just check it out. Hudson, New York is about 2 hours north of New York City, so I didn't want to bring a ton of stuff with me, so I ended up just bringing stickers to sell. This was an outdoor event, and the fee to be there was $15, and you also had to bring your own tent and table and everything. Luckily, we already had everything, and this event was local to her, so we didn't really have to buy anything for this. The one expense that I'm not counting here is the train from New York City to Hudson, New York, because I was gonna go there anyway to visit family, and being kind of a dual purpose trip, just not gonna count it. So this event was on a Saturday, and it went from about 9 a.m. to early afternoon, so it wasn't even a full day. There were probably about 20 vendors there, and what they were selling varied widely. Anything from flowers to food to antiques to jewelry, fine art, lots of stuff. I'm not gonna lie, it was a tough crowd. There was a lot of old people there that were probably just there to get their walk-in, lots of families, and lots of people just looking. My only customers that day were this bike gang of 12-year-olds who bought some stickers for their bikes. Honestly, probably the coolest people there. So the total cost for the event was $7.50, because remember, we split the table, but total sales for the day was less than $30. Technically, the event was profitable, but not really if we're being real. Sure, it was a flop on the financial side, but it just really wasn't a great use of time. Breaking down what likely went wrong here, I'm not a local, so I don't know how well this event was marketed or advertised. I'm gonna assume not super well because not a lot of people showed up. The event was in a small town park, so people would have to drive by and see it from the road and get drawn in that way. The other factor at play here was that it was just a broad market, just the general public. Of course, I don't expect any of these people to know my work, and that was their first time interacting with it, and if it didn't interest them, they would just walk by. Overall, I probably wouldn't do an event like this again, but I also think it would have been a tough crowd for anybody. Next was a complete 180 to Adobe MAX in Miami, Florida. To give you a sense of scale, this was a 3-day event with about 10,000 attendees, and most of these people worked in either the creative industry or the tech industry, so really specific audience. To back up a bit, I got a cold email from Adobe back in April asking if I wanted to apply to be an Adobe Marketplace artist. I actually thought it was a scam at first, so I kind of ignored the email for a little while, but went back and looked at it and eventually decided to apply. I kind of applied thinking like I'm not gonna get in, there's no chance in hell, but I ended up getting a reply back from them in July saying I was accepted. Aside from the application, which was free, I only had to pay a $100 fee after I got accepted, which is basically nothing for an event like this. As a marketplace artist, I got full access to the event, and I got to bring one booth helper with me, so I brought Mike. Since this was a massive event and I'd never done anything like this before, it was really tricky to kind of figure out how much stuff to bring. I ended up shipping one box and bringing a few carry-on bags to get everything there. We got there a day early for load-in before the event kicked off, and this was hands down the most legit setup I've ever had. Adobe supplied the booth and the printed graphics that we designed, so when we got there, everything was all set up and ready to go, and we just had to unpack our stuff and get everything set up. My booth was right next to my fellow Brooklynite homie, Eric from Alone Time, and I got to see a lot of old faces and meet some new ones that I've only met online before. I had way more product variety for this event than usual and ended up making a bunch of new stuff in prep for this one. I had 4 t-shirt designs, a tote bag, a bandana, a variety of mini prints, 5-pin designs, a sticker pack, a sticker sheet, and a huge variety of single stickers. The first day of the event ran from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., but we got there super early at 8 a.m. to finish setting up, so it was a full 12-hour day for us, and it was super intense. I honestly wish I had more video footage of the day, but there was just no time. Like, there were times where there'd be surges of crowds, and then it'd be a little bit quieter, and this was on repeat all day like a roller coaster. It was honestly such a rush.
That person was unfazed.
The second day ran from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and of course we got there early again to get everything set up and in order. And obviously this day wasn't as long as the first one, but the crowds and the intensity of everything was definitely on par. Tuesday was definitely like the party night of the event, so that's why the marketplace ended earlier. There was a ton of food and sculptures and even a performance by T-Pain. The last day of the event ran from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and it definitely was nowhere near as intense as the first 2 days, and I would say that people started clearing out a bit early. During the slow time on this day, we ended up making friends with B&H, who actually had a booth across from us. And ironically, my studio in the city is down the street from their store on 34th, so we're also neighbors in real life. So we kind of connected over that, and they printed up some removable stickers for us to play with, and we stuck them all over the booth. My best-selling item at Adobe was this lucky cat pin, which I actually ended up selling out of. I know I'm not giving specific numbers on profit because I'm not totally sure if I want that information on the internet, but to give you guys a ballpark, the total sales from this event ranged in the $5,000 to $8,000 mark. There were also a lot more expenses for this event. Things like flights, hotels, food, an assistant for the booth, the fee, and just other random things that were needed throughout the time. So subtracting these expenses put profit more in the range of $3,000 to $6,000. Overall, Adobe MAX was an amazing experience, and I'm truly honored that I was even chosen to be there. There were a bunch of factors that made this event great from a sales perspective, one being that it was a really specific audience. The majority of my audience online is mostly graphic designers, and those people were at this event. I was also in a place where some of the people attending had known my work previously, and that's always a plus. There was also a ton of foot traffic. With 10,000 attendees, there was a good chance that at least some of them would like my work. The other thing is that there were only 20 other artist booths, so 20 artist booths to 10,000 attendees, that's pretty good odds and a pretty good ratio. But all the sales talk aside, this event was awesome for just meeting new people and connecting with people that I already knew, so just overall really valuable. Exactly 1 week after Adobe MAX was CreativeWorks East here in Brooklyn, New York. To paint the scene for this one, this was a 3-day conference with 2 of those days being a pop-up market for artists. This conference probably had about 200 attendees, but that's just me guessing based on what I saw. I don't really know for sure. How I got into this one, I evented at CreativeWorks last year in Memphis, Tennessee, so I got invited back this year, and it was great because it was local for me. There was a table fee of $150, but since it was local, it was great because I didn't have to worry about hotels or flights or any of those other kind of expenses. The only thing that I had were cab rides. For this one, I brought all the same merch as Adobe MAX, but I brought a couple other things with me, like a couple originals and trading cards, just because I had the freedom and flexibility to bring stuff with me without worrying about packing it up and getting it on a flight. So this pop-up market was open to the conference attendees, but also open to the general public. The first day of the conference was a full vending day, so I got there super duper early to get my table set up. I hadn't set up anything prior to that, so it was a total fresh setup, and it took probably about an hour and a half to get everything right. Coming off of something like Adobe MAX, these crowds felt really manageable. There were busy times and there were slower times, but overall not as intense or crazy, which was sort of nice. CreativeWorks was also nice because I was able to vend among friends. There was a lot of people who were at the previous one that were also at this one, so it was just kind of like a nice little reunion. I also made a couple new vending friends as well that are also local to New York, but I'll drop everybody on the screen. Day 2 was another full day, and we got there a little bit early to kind of get everything set back up. It was definitely a bit slower than the first day, but it was kind of fun because we got to catch some presentations. Some of my favorites were from Kelly Anderson and Dazzle Studio. Those guys did an awesome job. And also being very interested in production, I got to meet the people from Threadless and Cotton Bureau. They all had samples with them, and if you've ever tried to source blanks or just look at blanks in general, you'll know that it's really hard to come across these things. So the fact that they all had everything there, I was able to look at this stuff and get more of a feel and ask them questions in real time. So for me, that was really valuable to meet them. Again, ballparking here, the total sales from this event were in the vicinity of $1,000. And the total expenses for this event came out to be about $210 with the table fee and the cab rides. Overall, I really enjoy the community and the people around CreativeWorks. I think it's a bit more down-to-earth feeling than some of the other larger design conferences, and for that reason, I'm always happy to go. Breaking this event down, it was great for me because it was local, so it kept my expenses really low. Audience-wise, this one was also on the nose because, again, it was all graphic designers and creators and some people who were already familiar with my work too. I mentioned before that this event was open to the public. However, it was on the second floor in a space in Industry City, which was not super accessible or easy to find just off the street for anybody in the public, so we didn't really have any general public sales. Shortly after the two Creative Cons, my friend Dylan reached out about a holiday pop-up market he was putting on in Greenpoint in the beginning of December. It was going to be a group of artists and makers that he curated and a one-day pop-up. We lucked out with no table fee for this one, and we ended up just schlepping it on the subway with some roller bags to get everything there. We got there at 12:30 to get set up, and the setup did end up taking about an hour and a half. Overall, this was a really chill, small market with just 12 other vendors and open to the public. I didn't really have a best-selling item at this one. It was pretty even across the board in terms of what type of item sold. Sales from this event came to about $100, and with the cost for the subway for two people, minus $11.60, so about $90 in profit-ish. Okay, so my overall thoughts on everything. None of these events were technically a monetary loss, which I'm very thankful for, but not all of them were the best use of my time. While money is obviously super important and losses are not good, it's not the total picture. There's a lot of upfront time that goes into prepping for these events, no matter the size. There's, of course, getting the inventory ready and packed to go. There's getting the POS set up and making sure that all the inventory is nice and synced. There's the logistics of getting to and from the event, even if it is local. And then, of course, there's the setup and the teardown time and the actual time that you spend at the event. All of this adds up super quickly, and even if it's a one-day event, you inevitably end up spending more than one day getting ready for it. So in a way, you kind of have to ask yourself, would this time be spent better doing something else? Maybe making more art or working on a YouTube video or promoting yourself in some other way, or maybe even just taking a breather. Based on these experiences, I would say that the non-specific public events are just harder for me to crack for whatever reason. I definitely plan on doing more markets and cons in the future, but there are now some questions and considerations that I would have before signing up. And those would be, what's the theme of the market, or who's the main audience? If you know your typical audience base already, then you can figure out pretty quickly if you're gonna be a good fit. Generally speaking, I think it's better if the event is themed because you have a better idea of what kind of people are gonna show up, what they're looking for, what they might want, who you can appeal to, and just overall your general setup and like what kind of vibe you're gonna give, and if it's gonna be a good fit for everyone. The next question I'd ask is how many attendees are expected? I think it kind of goes without saying, but more is better. The more people that are there, the more potential you have for sales and the better potential you have to appeal to some of those people. Especially at unthemed or broad events, volume is really all you have in that case. My third question would be, how many artists or vendors will be there? This is kind of the other half of the equation of the previous question. Even if there is a ton of attendees, but there's also now a lot of vendors, the ratio is not exactly in your favor. And it's not that everything has to be like a cutthroat competition, but most people who show up at events do have kind of a set budget, and you definitely want to be one of those people that they buy something from. I don't have a good equation to figure out if an event is worthwhile or not in that case, but you could just do some simple division with the amount of attendees versus the vendors and figure out if you think it's a good ratio. Another question I'd ask is, will the event be marketed beforehand, and if so, how? This is a pretty big one no matter what, because if people don't know, then people won't go. In the cases of conventions where tickets are sold, there's obviously a lot of marketing that goes into that because they have to sell tickets. So you're kind of already in a good place because of that. And again, you kind of know the audience going into it, but definitely if it's a public event, then the marketing definitely has to go into that. And unfortunately, if you're not the one in control of the event or putting the event on, you don't necessarily know how that's being handled unless you ask. And lastly, the other question I'd ask is, where is it? of course. Travel events obviously take a lot more time and the expenses stack up super quickly. So with that said, if the points that I mentioned before aren't really looking that great, if you add travel on top of it, it might not be the best kind of event to go to. If it's something like a local event, it might be worth your while because it's really just your time that you're playing with at the end of the day. The other piece of location that I think is really important is where is the actual event, because if it's a public event and it's relying heavily on a lot of organic foot traffic, if it's in a place that's really hard to find or it's really tucked away or hard to get to, it definitely severely limits any kind of organic traffic, and then now you're relying on the marketing component, which is again tricky. So that would be another thing I'd want to know, and especially if you're local, you can kind of figure out, is this in a good spot? Is this going to be in a place where people are going to just find it? Okay, so the one thing that I didn't factor into this is the breakdown of the actual profit. All products have a base cost to produce or manufacture, which is also known as the cost of goods sold. So the ballpark profits that you see is actually a bit lower because obviously it costs money to produce these items, and what you end up taking away is less. I didn't want to get that deep into the weeds in this video because I think it gets away from the topic, but I did just want to mention that. Later.